It's very interesting to watch this clip, because the thing that I find most compelling or most interesting isn't so much that Steve is singing Die Stem. I mean, come on, we've come to expect that from Steve Hofmeyr. But it's actually the reaction of the crowd. He seems to elicit a very emotional response. Let's watch it. Now, Sipho, that's actually what I find the most interesting thing about that. It's that very emotional reaction by the crowd. This isn't an academic argument after all.
Look, you can't argue against that, and you can't argue against what those people are feeling at that moment. And you know what I really want to point out is the fact that when you have people who feel isolated from society, who feel excluded, who feel like they don't count, perhaps where they once counted, they don't count anymore, you will always be able to find people who can use that for their own ends. So without perhaps discounting the feelings of people within the white community, within the Afrikaner community, who feel like South Africa has just completely ignored them or passed them by, without putting that down, I do want to criticize the likes of Mr. Hofmeyr, who I think know better than that. They know that they're playing with extreme emotions, actually. And, it's no wonder we might feel, sitting in, Johannesburg or in Cape Town, we might feel, wow, what an extreme reaction, what are they doing? But we shouldn't forget that there are people for whom this stuff still means something.
The people that I know, I'm Afrikaans. The people I know who's Afrikaans, they don't have this feeling of there are people out there to get us, or that we are being repressed, or I don't know where that comes from. It is a very strange thing for me, because I don't know what is the history behind that. It may be because maybe it comes from people who were used to being in charge and used to be the ones who call the shots, and they're not anymore, and there's some kind of nostalgia for the so-called good old bad old days when they were in charge. But the people I know who's really embraced the new South Africa, who are Afrikaans speaking, they don't have that feeling at all.
Right, but is it perhaps not nostalgia for a language? You lived in a country once where your mother tongue was the language of education, where the national anthem was in your mother tongue, and I mean, look, I'm not Afrikaans, but could it perhaps be that?
Well, I think the language is often invoked as something that people want to hold on to, for good reason, of course, because I think it's actually quite a beautiful language. You can swear very well in it.
Yes, you can.
But I think it's also sometimes used the language is used sometimes as an excuse to talk about other things. In the same way that some people talk about crime when they really want to talk about race, some people want to also talk about language when they want to talk about not being in favor of any kind of transformation or change. So it's complicated, because there is the language thing. The language and the affinity that many of us have with the Afrikaans language is very strong, but I don't think it's the only thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.